I didn't think this would be how it ended. I had imagined many versions of old age, sitting in the back seat while my grandchildren argued over music, Sunday lunches that lasted too long, maybe a small room in someone's house where I would try not to be a burden. But not this, not a room with my name taped to the door. Not strangers calling me dear because they don't know what else to say. I'm 72 now. I've raised 5 children, 5 lives that once depended on my hands to eat, to sleep, to feel safe. I remember knowing the sound of each of their cries, even in the dark. I remember how my body learned their schedules before my mind did. The day they brought me here, no one said the word out loud. No one said a silo. They said things like, just for now, and it's safer, and you'll have help. I nodded. I've always been good at nodding. As I sat in the passenger seat, watching familiar streets disappear, I realized something quietly painful. This was the first time in my life I didn't know where I was going next, and no one noticed. I spent most of my life inside routines that didn't feel like choices at the time. There were years when my name was rarely spoken without a request attached to it. Someone needed a ride. Someone needed money for a school trip. Someone needed dinner earlier, later, different. I learned to listen for footsteps instead of my own thoughts. When you have 5 children, silence feels suspicious. It usually means something is wrong. Their father worked long hours. When he was home, he was tired in a way that filled the room. I became the space around everyone else, the one who absorbed things so they wouldn't spill. I don't remember deciding to disappear slowly. It just happened. A missed appointment here, a postponed dream there. Conversations I rehearsed in my head but never started because there was always a better time. Later became a habit. As they grew older, I told myself this was the reward, independence. They didn't need me the same way anymore. That was supposed to feel like success, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being included in the ordinary details of their lives. I knew the headlines, not the stories. Birthdays were remembered, feelings were assumed, and I never said anything. Not when visits became shorter, not when phone calls turned into updates instead of conversations. I kept thinking, they're busy, this is normal, this is what good mothers accept. Silence, I learned, can look a lot like understanding from the outside. The move didn't happen all at once. It arrived disguised as concern. First it was suggestions. Someone mentioned stairs being dangerous. Someone else talked about medication schedules. They spoke to each other more than they spoke to me. I was in the room, but the conversation floated just above my head, like it didn't need my permission to exist. I noticed how quickly they agreed with one another. 5 different lives suddenly aligned. That should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like a decision had already been made somewhere I wasn't invited. The hardest part wasn't the place itself. The room is clean, the food is warm, the nurses are kind in a practiced way. The hardest part was realizing how easily everyone adjusted. After the first week, the visits slowed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. enough to make excuses sound believable. I told myself they were relieved, that they slept better knowing I was taken care of. At night, I replayed moments I hadn't thought about in years. Times I swallowed words because I didn't want to be difficult. Times I accepted less because asking for more felt selfish. I wondered when I had taught them that I would be fine with anything. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who assume you're okay because you've always been okay before. I don't cry much here. Crying feels like another thing to clean up after. Instead, I sit by the window and watch cars come and go, trying to remember when my life stopped feeling like something I belonged to. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to understand what actually hurt. It wasn't that my children brought me here. I can follow the logic. Aging isn't gentle. Bodies fail quietly and then all at once. Help becomes necessary whether pride allows it or not. I understand all of that. What hurt was realizing how familiar this feeling was. I had felt it before, many times, just in smaller ways. Being the last to sit down at the table. Being interrupted mid-sentence and not continuing. Being thanked for everything and consulted about nothing. This place didn't create that pattern. It only made it impossible to ignore. I had spent decades teaching people how to treat me without ever meaning to. I rewarded absence with understanding. I replaced disappointment with silence. I confused being needed with being valued. Looking back, there were moments I could have spoken. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. But honesty felt risky. Silence felt safer. It kept the peace. It kept me useful. Now, usefulness has an expiration date. Some nights I imagine a version of myself who asked for more space in conversations, who said, "I'm tired," and meant more than sleep. I don't know how that version's life turned out. I only know she would recognize herself more clearly in the mirror. This realization didn't arrive as regret. It arrived as clarity. Quiet, late, and impossible to unsee. I don't tell this story because I think someone is wrong. My children aren't cruel. They call, they visit when they can. They bring things I didn't ask for and ask if I need anything else. They say they're grateful. I believe them. But gratitude doesn't sit with you in the quiet hours. Here, days are measured differently, by meals, by medication cups, by the sound of carts in the hallway. I've learned the rhythm of a life that no longer belongs to anyone else's schedule. For the first time, no one is waiting on me. Sometimes I wonder what they tell people when my name comes up. That I'm safe, that I'm comfortable, that I'm being taken care of. All of that is true. What's harder to explain is the space between those truths. I look at my hands now and see a lifetime of holding on. Children, bags, problems that weren't mine to solve, but somehow became mine anyway. I held so tightly for so long that I never noticed when no one was holding me back. There's a chair by the window that catches the afternoon light just right. I sit there most days. I don't think about the past as much as I thought I would. I think about how quiet it is to finally be still. And sometimes I wonder how many people, like me, mistake silence for peace, until one day it becomes permanent. If this felt familiar, leave a comment.